Mario's Madness is one of the biggest horror mods in the FNF community, and the version 2 update is still being worked on, but may come soon. Game Boy Mario's lore has just been created by Marco Antonio himself, and it is big. This sets a whole new tone to the story and shows a bit of a backstory behind itself. This video will show Game Boy Mario's lore tied towards Mario's Madness. The year is 1995. Nintendo begins the development and planning to make a successor for the Game Boy, a console that could run 32-bit games and for it to be on par with the newly announced Ultra 64. That is when the new console project nicknamed Atlantis is initiated. Nintendo hires a software development company quite experienced with such devices. An American company called Optisoft is chosen to develop the console, its interface, and everything that entails, with the project being put in charge of one person named Christine Hermer, a 25-year-old woman, single and with a lot of debt under her name, who is extremely smart and technically savvy. She is put in charge of creating a working prototype of the console. The progress was quite smooth. Christine had been working on the prototype for several weeks and was about to show it to the company for approval to send it to Nintendo. One night, while she was working on the console, an email arrives in her mailbox. Confused, she goes down the stairs and finds a red letter in front of her door. When she opens it, she finds something that broke her. Her mortgage payment was not enough, and the house was going to be repossessed in a month. She could not believe it. All of her hard work just vanished in front of her eyes. In a moment of desperation, with tears in her eyes, she started drinking and started to lose control. She started making disturbances in her own house. She sat down on the PC and started messing up her code, writing nonsense. Finally, she started screaming until she passed out on the floor. The next morning when she wakes up, she realizes that there is something on her computer screen. A set of white dots that resembled the shape of a person were flashing on the screen. Surprised, she takes the floppy disk where she had all the code for the prototype to the company building and began to experiment with it. I can do something big with this. Sell it to Nintendo and make millions. Screw the console, she said to herself. She started to make a journal to write down the changes with the experiment. Not having a place to store all the data from the floppy disk temporarily, she decides to use some of the stuff that Nintendo gave her. A Super Mario Land 2 cartridge. By doing this and reloading the code, she realizes that the silhouette had another form. It was all monochrome. A form similar to Mario was looking at her from a black abyss. When she connected her PC to the internet, the entity started to show things on the screen. At first it was just scribbles. Then Japanese characters started to appear. It wasn't until a week later that the entity started to show English words, whole sentences. Is there anyone there? It is cold in here. What am I doing here? Are things that appeared on the screen. Christine was fascinated with that. She supposed that she had created a kind of artificial intelligence while she was in her moment of anguish. The thing could probably learn with her PC connected to internet. After that, the screen started showing only 2 letters, GB. It stayed that way for 6 days straight. Christine guessed that that was the name of the entity she created, and that's what she started calling it. Christine continued experimenting with the cartridge, putting the data into other cartridges she had. When she tried to use her Kirby's Dream Land cartridge instead, the entity that appeared on the television changed its shape. Now it resembled the main character of the video game. The same thing happened when she tried to with her copy of Pokemon Red. It was quite strange. Could the creature change appearances depending on the ROM data? Every day was just her experimenting on the entity. Although Christine would love to learn more about it, GB didn't like it too much. So much so that same night, the entity began to speak to her from the screen. Why are you doing this? This hurts a lot. Please leave me alone. Christine ignored this and continued with the experiments. This was not too fun for the entity. You think this is just a game, right? Pretend you're some kind of god? This is my world. I'll show you who a god is. The screen turned off. There was nothing. Christine wondered what had happened until it began to smell like ashes. The cartridge had burned, and with it losing all the entity code along with the console prototype coding. Desperate to have lost the progress of almost 3 weeks, she got in her car and went home to rest. When she lay in her bed, she began to have a very strange nightmare. She was on a hill near a sea. Everything was black and white. There were blocks flying and gray things with teeth and eyebrows walking on the floor. It was very strange. She looked at herself and had gloves on, black overalls and a white shirt. She looked at herself in the reflection of the water, and she had the face of Luigi. She was extremely scared with this. This is just a dream. I think I must have become too obsessed with that silly plumber guy, she said to herself. She calmed down and began to walk through the monochrome world until she found a big hill, a mountain with an entrance, and a bell above the entrance. Upon entering the black, cold room, she realizes where she was. It was the bonus stage of Super Mario Land 2. With the claw, the items, the floor, everything was the same. But in the corner of the room, there was something. A figure turned from behind, in a white cap and black overalls, with black hair and shiny shoes. Is that Mario? She asked herself. As she approached the creature, she froze for what she saw. The figure turned around. It was a grotesque version of the plumber, with an extremely big smile and a face that seemed to be melting, with eyes and a smile as white as moonlight, dripping with black liquid from its mouth. Its arms began to stretch out in a grotesque manner, with black veins sticking out from under its gloves. The figure stood in front of Christine and said with a voice vaguely similar to Mario's, "Finally, we meet face to face. What do you think of my appearance, dear?" More scared than ever, she ran out of the room trying to escape the beast. While she left the mountain, she realized that the whole world had changed. The white sky was now pure static. The trees and bushes now had eyes that would not stop staring at her. The white castle that was seen on an island on the horizon was now black, with a silhouette that seemed to be hanged by the neck being seen by the low lighting of the place. While looking at all this, she turned around, and there it was, the creature crashing after her, running in an unhuman manner, laughing as it chased her. They kept running for a few minutes, until Christine stumbles upon the corpse of a Koopa, falling to the ground. The first thing she sees when she tries to get up is GB about to attack her. He grabs her by the neck with his skeletal hand, and without letting go, he throws her back to the floor abruptly. While she struggles about the lack of air, the monster tells her, "Well, where do you think you were going? I thought this was fun for you." After this, the thing throws her into the sea. When she falls into the water, a lot of gloved hands grab her by the arms and legs, dragging her to the bottom of the sea. The last thing she sees before losing consciousness is the beast standing at the seashore, laughing, pointing at her while she drowned, with her heart beating 1,000 and sweating cold. She tries to calm down from everything that happened. She gets out of bed and walks slowly to her kitchen to make herself some tea, but suddenly her TV turns on, showing just white static. Christine is surprised by this and approaches the television to observe what was happening. Without giving prior warning, the same hand that grabbed her came out of the glass screen. She gets tossed out into her sofa and tries to get as far away as possible, crawling desperately on the carpet. That's when the entity comes off the screen totally, twitching and contorting. It was him again, but this was no nightmare. The thing was standing there, his silhouette being only visible by the static on the television, just like how he appeared on the PC's monitor. Suddenly, the TV screen blew up, leaving the whole place in darkness. The only thing Christine could hear was the footsteps of the creature, walking on the broken glass, slowly coming towards her. It all went silent. She could only hear the sounds of her own breathing. Her heart was pounding so rapidly. It was then where the thing opened its two white, lifeless eyes in front of her. "You and I are going to have so much fun for a long time." The next morning, when the agency that was going to be responsible for the mortgage arrives at her house, they found out something horrible. When they got to the main room, they found Christine's rotting dead corpse lying on the sofa, her face disfigured, a huge hole in her chest, and instead of having blood dripping, she had a black, viscous liquid coming out everywhere. When the agency employees saw this, they immediately called the police. They began to investigate what happened, but no one found clues or evidence that could lead to the person responsible for all this. Without having any kind of clue, they called the case closed and confiscated everything that was in her house. Upon finding out about this, Nintendo cuts all kind of contact with Optisoft and cancels the plans for the future console. Months later, Optisoft ends up declaring bankruptcy and everything that was in the building is auctioned off, including the burned Super Mario Land 2 cartridge. Still unsalvageable, or that's what they believe.